hockey, Darren Pang, St. Louis Blues analyst, Chicago Blackhawk vet, joins us from the Show Me State today. Hey, Panger, I looked up your hockey DB. I had all your cards. I thought you were a St. Louis Blue. How did you end up on the air with the Blues as a Blackhawks guy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a little bit of a leap of faith on both sides. When John Davidson took over the St. Louis Blues, I was actually finishing up in Arizona, and I was under contract. But obviously, they went into that situation there, and our contracts and everything was up in the air. And I played golf with him in Arizona, and he said, "Any chance you consider coming to St. Louis? I'd like to make a couple of changes here." Anyway, as it turns out, I said to him, JD, I can't go to St. Louis. The only team I ever played for was Chicago, and you know what that rivalry's like. And JD said, "Don't kid yourself. You weren't that good anyway." So the way he said it was typical JD, and it was it made me laugh. And then he said, "You know what? Everybody here knows you as a broadcaster. You've done, thousands how many games you've done, nationally, and then, so just come into St. Louis and they'll figure it out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work." My wife and I flew in. We met up with everybody here. That was that was 2009. So I'm just about to sign another 3-year contract with Fox Sports Midwest and the Blues, and I'm really thankful. I took this, I guess, a leap of faith, but all in all, I'll tell you this: the fans in St. Louis, I wasn't sure, and we had the Winter Classic. It just seems like a few years ago. And I dressed with the Blackhawk alumni, and I asked loads of people. I said, I don't really feel comfortable, playing in this game. Kelly Chase took me aside and said, "Listen, fans they're just gonna give you such a great response, and it's gonna be fun. It's the only time you're ever gonna play in one of these games." And so I did, and it was overwhelming. It was so much fun. They're hockey fans. They love their people, and they cheer like crazy. And I love it here in St. Louis. It's been just a thrill of a ride, to be quite honest with you. A ride that here we are, us broadcasters here. We got Stanley Cup rings, and they treat us like we're part of the team. It's a phenomenal organization, and the people here in St. Louis are absolutely outstanding.
Good for Chaser, by the way. Good Kelvington boy there. And I got to say this, before we look ahead to the NHL, I want to look back for a second. Both Darren and I were at the Kinsman dinner last year in Saskatoon. I actually rode in that limo with you, if you recall, with Bernie Parent, Martin Brodeur, Grant Fuhr, Eddie Belfour. Who am I missing? As an old goalie myself, I was just in absolute heaven. What's it? Belfour? Fuhr? Oh, Glenn Hall. And Glenn wasn't in the limo. That's why. What a night that was.
That's right. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I was going through some pictures just the other day, just kind of, going through, a year ago. And again, that's Kelly Chase was the one that really, he organizes a lot in terms of getting together. If we have this type of theme, would Darren Pang go do it? When he told me who was going to be there, I was just beside myself, just overwhelmed. I'd been there before at the Kinsman a couple of times, but the one time that I really had a great time was because it was a good, longtime friend, over 40 years we've been friends, Steve Eiserman and Bo Jackson. A really unique group. God, that's got to be 6 years ago by now. But love going there and love going to Kinsman. But that goalie night was so special. And afterwards, we went up to his suite and we had a couple of cold ones. And honestly, every one of the guys there just kept looking over to Glenn Hall for answers. Every time they were talking about something, they'd look over to Mr. Goalie. And there he was, having a nice cold one and just chatting hockey, and just like he's one of the guys. And that's a special human being. And I know because he was there, that's what brought those other great goaltenders there to be alongside to raise a lot of money for charity.
So from viewers, one thing that's great about this show, Panger, is we have the input from the viewers. So here's one. Nelson wants to know, what was the mood before things started to turn around for the Blues on their way to winning the Cup? I'll tweak that to say, what was the magical moment when that team became Stanley Cup contenders and finished it off?
Yeah, it's going from last place to where they ended up in first place was something else. But there was always a feeling that this team was going to be a really good team. They just, you added Bozak and you added Ryan O'Reilly. They're just some new players in the lineup. I think Pat Maroon was a new player, and they just didn't have the cohesion at the very beginning. It seemed like they were just all trying to find their spots. And, as a new head coach, Mike Yeo had all these personalities to deal with, and maybe some of the players got lost in the shuffle. A couple of Saskatchewan boys, I recall early on, being between the benches, Jaden Schwartz and Braden Shen. They played a lot of minutes. They were on the power play. They were always looked upon to be key players. And all of a sudden, they were kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit. And I think there was a little frustration amongst the team. And then I got to tell you, it was that early January, and I know some of the boys went out to that little bar in Philadelphia, and Gloria got played. So it's not Gloria, but it was that night in Philly where Jordan Binnington stepped in and played just phenomenal, shutting the door down on the Flyers. You got to remember, Jake Allen was great on the road, but the whole team was having trouble at home. So if there was one moment that I thought was a big change, it was probably that. It was that they could still have Jake Allen go on the road and win 1-0 in tough buildings, but they needed something different at home. They needed some moxie at home, and I think that's where Jordan Binnington came into Enterprise Center, and this place was, honest to goodness, it just got lit up. And every time he made a save, average, whatever, sensational, the roars were incredible, and I think the confidence was gained by the players. So that, to me, would be a big moment. Shortly after that, when Craig Berube took over, they had a home-and-home against Nashville. I love the way Nashville plays. I thought they were rolling. I thought they were a team that could win the Stanley Cup. And the Blues went in. They fought them. They hit them. They went 2-0 on a 2-game weekend romp. And that, to me, told me that this St. Louis Blues team could go all the way and win it all, or at least be there at the very end.
I'm looking this up as we go, Panger. Maybe you'll remember. I was in Vegas in February when the Blues were there. It was a tight game. I believe it went to overtime, but you guys ended up meeting in the playoffs anyways, in the bubble in Edmonton, and it was like absolute goaltending nightmare, if you recall, for both Fleury and the Blues. Vegas ended up coming out on top. So, you'll be telling Stanley Cup stories forever. You probably won't be telling bubble stories forever, but just take me through the Blues, playoff run, as brief as it was this summer, and maybe what they could have done different in your mind.
Well, I think after winning the Stanley Cup and having all the emotion, the Blues did find their way during the regular season. And I think the break really did. The break hurt a lot of teams, but I think the Blues probably more so than any other team, because they were just finding their game, and they hadn't taken a breath after winning the Cup and the parade, and then jumping into training camp and then being the defending champs. Every building you went into, that's all anybody wanted to talk about. And these players still, they went toe-to-toe with everybody out there. So I know when they came back to St. Louis and they were starting to skate in small groups, and obviously it just didn't seem the same. And although they went in there with a good attitude and tried, they just weren't the same during that round robin. Was, I think, a little odd for them, because there was meaning to it for placement purposes, but there really wasn't. And so they waited around. There were sometimes they had no games for 5 days. So I just think that by the time they got to it, they just weren't on their game. That's just the simple facts. There's no excuses. They just were not on their game. And that's why I think they're very, very highly motivated right now to prove that what was the bubble wasn't the St. Louis Blues team, and that they'll be ready to go once we get started again. Yeah,
they didn't look the same. And that game, by the way, was 6-5 Vegas in overtime. Jonathan Marchessault in overtime at 2:30, if you remember. Just a wild, like a defensive nightmare. And speaking of that, by the way, Alex Pietrangelo's gone. So how big of a hole is that on the Blues back end? And you're losing your captain, man. That's devastating.
It is. He does everything. I've been a big fan of his since he was drafted in 2008. And personally, you get to really lean on a guy and like a guy. You have a lot of conversations. It could be his kids. It could be my grandkids. It could be just hockey in the past. He's a hockey guy. He likes talking hockey, but he likes talking about other things too. So I'm gonna miss Alex. He's a really good person. But besides that, you tend to take someone for granted too when you're broadcasting a game, and all the little things that he did so well or does so well. I always said that his he had a lethal stick. He'd go into the corner, and he would never overwhelm anybody with big bravado or this big hit. He would go in there and he'd get the puck, and he'd come out with the puck. And then he'd make a play. So he was relied on defensively, going head-to-head with the other team's best players. He got a lot more candy on the power play in this last year, a lot more offensive zone time, and he had a heck of a year. He had his best year ever offensively, and I think as an overall defenseman. So will it hurt the Blues? Absolutely. I mean, Torrey Krug's not coming in here to be Alex Pietrangelo. And if Alex Pietrangelo were going to the Boston Bruins, he wouldn't try to replace Torrey Krug. So I think that the Blues will find a way with Colton Parayko and Marco Scandella. They've got some, Justin Falk will maybe come out of the shadows a little bit after only spending 1 year, and getting to know the guys now will be a big benefit as well. So as it stands right now, I mean, I think the Blues are still going to be an incredibly dynamic team, but I think it'll take an entire team to make up for the defensive prowess of both Jay Bouwmeester, that we're actually forgetting to talk about because his career sadly has come to an end after he had that cardiac episode last year. Just prior to our game in Vegas. So those are two stalwarts. Those are two great players, and they're certainly going to be missed.
One on Bo. He got his ring, made a lot of money. That, to me, is a sign from God. Yeah. That you're done, Bo. Great career. Yeah. And thank God he's still alive. Some guys... Yeah. Doesn't end up that way. Just from a couple of our viewers, from Todd Pinkney, he says, "Holy jumpin', I love the pangerisms." So yeah, you're like the new Howie Meeker panger. Glenn Olinkin says, is Glenn Hall still painting his barn during training camp? Probably not, Gary. He's a viewer in Winnipeg. But I'll say this about that night in Saskatoon. I'll never forget it. When you guys passed the mic to Glenn Hall and you said, "What do you think of this group up here? Fier, Brodeur, Belfour?" He goes, "I can't believe how ugly they all are."
That was unbelievable. That was unbelievable. I can't believe how ugly they all are.
Who could get away with that but Glenn Hall?
Yeah. That was very funny. That was very, and he was, as he was going up the steps to the stage, I kind of leaned over there and he goes, "Still strong as ever. I'm fine." What a wonderful man. The first time that I met Glenn Hall was in Salt Lake City. He was the goaltending coach for the Calgary Flames. Salt Lake City was their minor league team. They had sent down Mike Vernon. I think I was playing for at Milwaukee or Saginaw at the time. And I was going for lunch, walking down the sidewalk, and Glenn Hall's walking towards me as I was going to meet some of our guys for a pregame meal. And he extends his arm and he says, "Darren, Glenn Hall." And I was beside myself. I'm like, "Oh my, Mr. Goalie, we started talking a little goaltending. Next thing you know, he's on the sidewalk and he's in this low crouch and he's telling me that being a small guy, I'm going to have to get real low and look between guys and you're going to have to be really athletic. You're going to have to fight through traffic. And I was like, there's Glenn Hall, getting down in this super low crouch and showing me what to do before I had lunch. I was so inspired. First of all, to play Mike Vernon, he was for us smaller goaltenders, he was one I really looked up to. And then ended up, playing against him and meeting Glenn. But the next real time that I saw Glenn, I was in goal with the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was November of 1988. It was early in the year, and we were playing Vancouver, and the Blackhawks retired both Tony Esposito and Glenn Hall's sweater that night, and they both went up to the rafters as I was in the net for the Chicago Blackhawks. It was made quite an impression on me.
Look, Glenn Hall, 502 consecutive games without a mask.
Unbelievable.
Humboldt Sask. That's how we make him. Glenn, we're out of time, but I'll just say this. January 1st, NHL start. What do you think?
No, I'd say no on the 1st. I would say yes on the 15th. I think that's the date that I think just seems more realistic. The more I think of players coming in a training camp and everything starting with so many state-to-state regulations and also obviously in Canada. I'm very convinced that we're going to come up with an agreement and make it work for the betterment of the game and keep this momentum going as much as possible. For how great they did during the bubble, I think we've got to keep this thing going as much as possible, and I think it keeps a lot of people, let's face it, my dad lives in Fernie, BC. He lives and dies watching hockey. I'd be very sad if hockey wasn't on TV. And I know my dad's just like a lot of other, whether they be elderly gentlemen that just love hockey or just need something during the day, something to look forward to at night. So I'm hoping that we do continue on here.
January 15th, we'll take it. Panger, this has been awesome, man. Appreciate it. Stay safe, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Sorry for the problems with the earbuds there.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Darren Pang joining us from St. Louis, Missouri.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.